The text came in at 2:17 a.m., while I was elbow-deep in the guts of a Boeing 737, hydraulic fluid under my fingernails and the taste of airport coffee burning my throat like battery acid. Working late again. Mike really gets the pressure I'm under. Don't wait up. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at my phone screen, the blue glow reflecting off the polished aluminum of the aircraft's belly. Aaron Kellum, 41 years old, airline maintenance engineer, certified fool. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days making sure planes didn't crash, but I'd missed every warning sign that my marriage was nosediving straight into the ground. Mike Sandler. That name had been popping up in Lydia's conversations for months now, like a bad song on repeat. Mike understands the sales targets. Mike has such innovative ideas. Mike thinks I should try that new sushi place downtown. Mike. I wiped my hands on my coveralls and walked over to the break room, where Jace was hunched over a crossword puzzle, his bald head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Let me guess," he said, without looking up. "Another strategic planning session?" "Strategic something," I muttered, pouring myself another cup of coffee that could strip paint. 7 letters for workplace romance. Starts with A. "Affair," Jace said immediately. "Jesus, Aaron, you're not even trying to be subtle anymore." That was the thing about working night shifts at Houston Intercontinental. You developed a dark sense of humor about everything, including your own personal disasters. When you spend your nights crawling through aircraft engines, checking for metal fatigue and stress fractures, you start seeing cracks everywhere. I'd noticed them in my marriage months ago. Little things at first. Lydia staying later at the office, claiming the district sales manager position demanded more face time with her team. New perfume that smelled expensive and desperate. The way she'd giggle at her phone during dinner, then quickly flip it face down when I glanced over. You should see the way Mike looks at her in meetings. Her friend Shelby had mentioned at our last barbecue, wine making her tongue loose. Like she's the last piece of chocolate cake at a fat camp. I should have paid attention then. Should have asked questions. Instead, I'd focused on my work, on the mechanical precision of aircraft maintenance, where every bolt had a purpose and every system had backup protocols. Marriage, apparently, didn't come with the same safety features. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lydia. "Mike's showing me this amazing condo downtown. Says it has incredible city views. Might be late." I screenshot the message and checked the timestamp. 2:23 a.m. Either Mike was the most dedicated real estate agent in Houston, or my wife thought I was stupid enough to believe that property showings happened in the middle of the night. The location services on her phone, something she'd forgotten to turn off, showed her at the Meridian Tower downtown. Expensive place. The kind of building where young professionals with more ambition than sense paid $3,000 a month for 800 square feet and a view of the freeway. I pulled up the building's website on my phone. Studio apartments starting at $2,800. 1-bedroom units at $3,200. Way above Mike's pay grade as a junior sales associate, unless he had family money or was really, really good at his job. Or really, really good at something else. "You know what your problem is?" Jace said, finally looking up from his crossword. "You think like an engineer. Everything's got to make logical sense. But people? People are messed up. They do stupid shit for stupid reasons." He was right, of course. I'd spent 20 years in aircraft maintenance where cause and effect followed predictable patterns. Metal fatigue led to stress fractures. Improper torque led to loose bolts. Neglected maintenance led to catastrophic failure. But marriages weren't machines. You couldn't just replace the worn parts and expect everything to run smoothly again. My phone buzzed a third time. "Actually, going to crash at Shelby's tonight. Too tired to drive. See you tomorrow." Except Shelby lived in Katy, 20 miles west of downtown. And according to her Instagram story from an hour ago, she was home with her husband watching Netflix. I took a long sip of coffee and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger exactly. More like the calm that comes when you finally understand that the system you've been trying to repair is beyond saving. Jace, I said, what do you know about corporate HR policies? He raised an eyebrow. Enough to know they exist for a reason. Why? Just curious about workplace relationships, supervisors and subordinates, that kind of thing. Oh, that's easy. Most companies have strict policies about that shit, especially if one person has authority over the other. Conflict of interest, harassment liability, all that legal stuff. He grinned. Why? You thinking about asking out that cute scheduler from Delta? Something like that. I finished my coffee and got back to work, but my mind was racing. Lydia was a district sales manager. Mike was one of her direct reports. If their relationship was what I suspected it wasn't just adultery, it was a violation of company policy. The next few hours passed in a blur of routine maintenance checks and increasingly creative text messages from my wife. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., I had a collection of screenshots that told a story more fiction than fact. I drove home through the empty Houston streets, past the strip malls and apartment complexes that made up our corner of suburban paradise. The house looked exactly the same as always: brick facade, manicured lawn, white picket fence that Lydia had insisted we install because it looked professional. Professional. That was Lydia's favorite word. Everything had to be professional. Professional wardrobe, professional networking, professional development. Apparently, professional included screwing your subordinates in downtown condos. I parked in the driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, staring at our bedroom window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faint glow of a phone screen through the fabric. Time to find out just how professional my wife really was. I found Lydia in the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., fully dressed in yesterday's clothes, making coffee with the kind of exaggerated normalcy that screamed guilt. She'd clearly just gotten home. Her hair was still perfect, her makeup unsmudged, like she'd spent the night in a hotel room instead of passed out on her friend's couch. "Morning, honey," she said without turning around. "You're up early." "Just got off shift," I replied, settling into my usual chair at the kitchen table. "How was your night at Shelby's?" The slight pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. "Oh, you know, girl talk, wine, the usual." She turned around with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We ended up staying up way too late talking about work drama." "Work drama?" "Just the usual office politics. Nothing interesting." She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, studying my face. "You look tired. Rough night?" "Not as rough as yours, I'm guessing." Another pause. Longer this time. "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd taken throughout the night. "Well, according to your location services, you spent most of the evening at the Meridian Tower downtown. Funny thing is, Shelby posted Instagram stories from her house in Katy all night, so either you've figured out how to be in two places at once, or you're lying to my face." The color drained from Lydia's cheeks. She set down her coffee mug with hands that shook just enough to rattle the ceramic against the granite countertop. "Aaron, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You always were creative." I stood up and walked to the cabinet where we kept important documents. "But before you start explaining, there's something you should know. I've been doing some research on your company's HR policies." I pulled out a folder I'd prepared during my lunch break the previous week. Yes, I'd been planning this conversation longer than she realized, and spread the contents across the kitchen table. Employment contracts, company handbook, organizational charts. "Section 4.7 of your employee handbook," I read aloud. "Romantic relationships between supervisors and direct reports must be disclosed to human resources within 30 days of commencement. Failure to disclose such relationships may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination." Lydia's face went from pale to gray. "How did you Your company posts their employee handbook online. Amazing what you can find with a simple Google search. I flipped to another page. Section 4.8 is even more interesting. Use of company resources for personal relationships, including company credit cards, vehicles, or expense accounts, constitutes theft and fraud. Aaron, please, let me explain what's really happening. What's really happening is that you've been sleeping with Mike Sandler for months, using company time and resources to do it, and lying to me about every detail. My voice stayed calm, which seemed to unnerve her more than shouting would have. The question is, what are we going to do about it? She tried tears first, big, dramatic sobs that might have worked 6 months ago, before I'd learned to recognize her manipulation tactics. It's not what you think. Mike and I were just friends. He's been helping me with some difficult accounts, and yes, maybe we've gotten close, but it's not. Lydia. I held up my phone, showing her location history from the past month. You've been at his apartment or that downtown condo 47 times in the last 60 days. Unless you're running the world's most intensive sales training program, I think we both know what's really happening. The tears stopped. Just like that. Like someone had flipped a switch. Fine, she said, her voice turning cold. Yes, Mike and I have been seeing each other. But you can't blame me for finding someone who actually appreciates what I bring to a relationship. When's the last time you took me somewhere nice? When's the last time you showed any interest in my career, my goals, my dreams? When's the last time you came home before midnight? When's the last time you had a conversation with me that didn't involve your work schedule or your strategic planning sessions? That's different. I'm building something. I'm advancing my career. Mike understands that. He supports my ambitions. Mike is 26 years old and makes $43,000 a year selling software to small businesses. His idea of supporting your ambitions is probably splitting the check at Applebee's. You don't know anything about him. I know he drives a BMW he can't afford, lives in an apartment that costs more than his monthly salary, and is stupid enough to think sleeping with his boss is a career advancement strategy. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. I also know that his employee file shows 3 previous jobs in 5 years, all ending with resigned in lieu of termination. Lydia stared at me like I'd grown a second head. How could you possibly know that? Because unlike you, I actually think before I act. Mike's employment history is public record. His financial situation is easy enough to figure out from social media posts and public databases. And his pattern of inappropriate workplace relationships? Well, let's just say you're not as special as you think you are. I walked to the bedroom and returned with 2 suitcases, the expensive matching set Lydia had bought for our honeymoon 7 years ago. Here's what's going to happen, I said, setting the suitcases on the kitchen table. You're going to pack your things and find somewhere else to stay while we figure out the divorce details. I've already contacted an attorney. Ms. Prewitt comes highly recommended, and she'll be in touch with you next week. You can't just throw me out. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. I pulled another document from the folder. The house was purchased with my inheritance from my father before we were married. Texas is a community property state, but premarital assets remain separate property unless they're specifically commingled, which they weren't. You bastard, you've been planning this. No, Lydia, I've been hoping I was wrong, but you've made it pretty clear that I'm not. She stood there for a long moment, looking around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. Then something shifted in her expression, a hardness I'd never seen before. Fine, but don't think this is over. I know things about you, Aaron. Things that could make your life very difficult. Such as? Your little side business. The aircraft parts you've been selling online. I wonder what your employer would think about that. I almost laughed. You mean the surplus parts I buy at government auctions and resell to private aircraft owners? The business I've been running legally for 8 years, with proper licensing and tax reporting? The business you've been encouraging me to expand because it brings in an extra $15,000 a year? Her face fell. I thought... You thought you had leverage, but here's the thing about thinking, Lydia. You actually have to use your brain. I picked up my phone and started typing. What are you doing? Sending an email to your HR department. Nothing dramatic, just a heads up that they might want to review their policies regarding supervisor-subordinate relationships. I'm including some documentation that might be relevant to their investigation. You wouldn't. I hit send and showed her the screen. Already did. The look on her face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent wondering if I was losing my mind. Pack your bags, Lydia. You've got until tonight to find somewhere else to stay. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. None of them were from Lydia. The first call was from Shelby, Lydia's supposed best friend and confidant. Aaron, oh my God, I am so sorry. I had no idea you knew about Mike. Lydia told me you two had an open marriage arrangement. I never would have covered for her if I'd known she was lying to you too. Interesting. So Lydia had been using her friends as unwitting accomplices, feeding them stories about our marriage to justify her behavior. I made a mental note to remember that detail. It might be useful later. The second call was from my attorney, Ms. Prewitt. Mr. Kellum, I have to say I'm impressed. Most of my clients come to me after they've already made emotional decisions they regret. You've documented everything, protected your assets, and positioned yourself beautifully for the divorce proceedings. We should meet this week to discuss strategy. The third call was from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Janet from Lydia's HR department. Mr. Kellum, this is Janet Rodriguez from Pinnacle Solutions HR. We received your email yesterday and wanted to follow up. Could you please call me back at your earliest convenience? We take these matters very seriously. I called Janet back first. Mr. Kellum, thank you for reaching out to us. We've initiated an investigation into the allegations you've raised, and I wanted to let you know that both employees in question have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our review. Both employees? Ms. Kellum and Mr. Sandler, yes. We've also discovered some irregularities in expense reports that we'll need to investigate further. I can't go into details, but I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. In less than 24 hours, I'd gone from being the clueless husband to being the guy who'd just blown up 2 careers with a single email. My phone rang again. This time it was Lydia. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed before I could even say hello. "They suspended me. They suspended Mike. They're talking about termination and criminal charges." Criminal charges? The expense reports, Aaron. They're saying we used company funds for personal expenses, but it was just a few dinners, some hotel rooms. Hotel rooms that you charged to the company while you were supposed to be working. It's not that simple. We were working. We were discussing strategies, planning campaigns. In hotel rooms, at night, while you told me you were at Shelby's house. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more desperate. "Aaron, please. You have to help me fix this. Call them back. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them what, Lydia? That I lied about the location data? That I fabricated the expense reports? That I somehow hacked into your phone to create fake text messages? I don't know. Something. Anything. My career is over, Aaron. They're going to fire me, and with this on my record, I'll never get another job in sales. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to turn your workplace into a dating service. Screw you, Aaron. Screw you and your self-righteous bullshit. You think you're so smart, so perfect, but you're just a glorified mechanic who never had the balls to take any real risks in life. You're right, I said calmly. I am just a glorified mechanic, but I'm a glorified mechanic who reads contracts before I sign them and thinks about consequences before I act. Apparently, that makes me smarter than a district sales manager and her boy toy. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Mike. Aaron, look, I know you're angry, and I get it, I really do, but this has gotten way out of hand. Lydia and we never meant for it to go this far. It just happened, you know? These things just happen sometimes. No, Mike, they don't just happen. You made a choice. Every time you picked up Lydia for a work meeting, every time you charged dinner to your expense account, every time you lied to my face at neighborhood barbecues, those were choices. Okay, fine, you're right. But destroying our careers isn't going to make you feel better. It's not going to save your marriage. My marriage was over the moment my wife decided her subordinate's dick was more important than her integrity. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure everyone understands the real cost of your choices. Listen, man, I know you're hurt. Hurt? Mike, I'm not hurt. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that my wife turned out to be the kind of person who would throw away 7 years of marriage for a few months of mediocre office romance. I'm disappointed that she was stupid enough to think she could lie to someone who troubleshoots complex systems for a living. But hurt? No. You can't hurt someone who's already moved on. Moved on? Aaron, this just happened yesterday. No, Mike. This happened months ago. Yesterday, I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. I hung up and blocked both their numbers. The rest of the week passed in a blur of attorney meetings, paperwork, and increasingly desperate voicemails from Lydia's friends trying to mediate the situation. Apparently, word had spread through their social circle, and the consensus was that I was being unreasonable and vindictive. Shelby left a particularly memorable message. Aaron, I know you're angry, but this is affecting all of us. Lydia is staying on my couch, crying constantly, and it's putting a strain on my marriage. Can't you just forgive her and work this out like adults? I called her back. Shelby, I have a question for you. If you found out that your husband had been cheating on you for months, using your friends to cover for him, lying to your face every single day, and potentially committing fraud with his company credit card, would you just forgive him and work it out like adults? That's different. How is it different? Because Lydia made a mistake. She's sorry. She wants to fix things. Lydia made dozens of mistakes over a period of months, and the only thing she's sorry about is getting caught. If I hadn't figured it out and documented everything, she'd still be lying to me right now. But Aaron, Shelby, I need you to understand something. Lydia isn't the victim here. She's a grown woman who made deliberate choices that hurt multiple people. The fact that those choices had consequences doesn't make her a victim. It makes her responsible. You're being cruel. No, Shelby, I'm being honest. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. By Friday, the social dynamics had shifted dramatically. Half of Lydia's friend group had quietly distanced themselves from the situation, while the other half had chosen sides. The neighborhood group chat, which I'd never paid much attention to before, had become a battlefield of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled accusations. Mrs. Becker, our elderly neighbor, who seemed to know everyone's business, stopped by Saturday morning with a casserole and some interesting information. I always wondered about that young man who kept visiting when you were at work, she said, settling into our kitchen chair like she belonged there. Very flashy car, very loud music. Not the type I'd expect Lydia to associate with professionally. You saw Mike coming to the house? Oh, yes, dear. Several times a week for the past few months. Always when you weren't home, always staying for hours. I did mention it to Lydia once, asked if everything was all right, and she told me he was helping her with some work project that required privacy. Privacy. That's what she said. Though I have to say, the kind of privacy they seemed to need usually involved closing all the blinds and turning up the music quite loud. I thanked Mrs. Becker for the casserole and the information, though I wasn't sure which was more valuable. The idea that Lydia had been bringing Mike to our house, our bed, added a layer of violation that made my stomach turn. But it also gave me an idea. Monday morning brought news that changed everything. Lydia and Mike hadn't just been fired, they'd been terminated for cause, which meant no severance pay, no unemployment benefits, and a permanent mark on their employment records that would make finding new jobs nearly impossible. But the real bombshell came from Janet in HR. "Mr. Kellum, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've discovered that Ms. Kellum and Mr. Sandler used company credit cards for personal expenses totaling over $12,000 in the past 6 months. We're referring the matter to law enforcement for potential fraud charges." $12,000. That was more than I'd expected, and it explained how Mike had been able to afford his lifestyle. They'd been funding their affair with company money, essentially stealing from their employer to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways. "There's something else," Janet continued. "We've also discovered that Ms. Kellum had been falsifying client meeting reports to cover her absences. Several clients have confirmed that meetings she claimed to have attended never actually took place. So it wasn't just adultery and fraud, it was also dereliction of duty. Lydia had been so focused on her relationship with Mike that she'd been neglecting her actual job, lying about client interactions, and potentially costing the company business." After I hung up with Janet, I sat in my truck outside the airport, watching planes take off and thinking about the systematic way Lydia had dismantled her own life. Every lie had required another lie to support it. Every deception had demanded greater risks to maintain. She'd built a house of cards and then acted surprised when it collapsed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Aaron, this is Mike. I got a new phone. We need to talk. Meet me at Starbucks on Westheimer at 2 p.m. This affects you too." I stared at the message for a long moment, trying to figure out what angle Mike was working. What could possibly affect me at this point? I'd already filed for divorce, documented everything for the attorneys, and moved on with my life. But curiosity got the better of me. I drove to the Starbucks and found Mike sitting in the corner, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of someone who'd finally realized the magnitude of his mistakes. "Aaron, thank God you came. We need to figure out how to fix this situation." "We don't need to do anything, Mike. You and Lydia created this mess. You can figure out how to deal with the consequences." "But that's just it. The consequences aren't just for us anymore. The fraud investigation, the criminal charges, they're going to dig into everything, every transaction, every expense report, every company asset we had access to. And some of those expenses were for things that involved you." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" "The company retreat last month. Lydia charged the hotel room to her corporate card, but you were there too. The investigators might think you were involved in the fraud. I was there because Lydia told me spouses were invited. I paid for my own meals, my own drinks, my own entertainment. But can you prove that? Do you have receipts for everything? Because if you don't, it's going to look like you were benefiting from the stolen money too." I studied Mike's face, looking for tells. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. His hands were shaking slightly, and he couldn't maintain eye contact for more than a few seconds at a time. "You're lying," I said finally. "What?" "You're lying. There's no way the investigators would consider me a suspect based on attending a company retreat with my wife. You're trying to scare me into helping you somehow." "Aaron, I'm trying to help you." "No, Mike. You're trying to help yourself, and frankly, I don't give a shit what happens to you." I started to get up, but Mike grabbed my arm. "Wait, please, just hear me out. You have 30 seconds. Lydia's pregnant." I sat back down. "She's pregnant, Aaron. About 6 weeks along, she's scared, she's broke, she's facing criminal charges, and she doesn't know what to do. Is it yours?" We don't know. The timing is complicated." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 6 weeks ago, Lydia and I had still been sleeping together occasionally, though our physical relationship had been declining for months. If she was pregnant, there was a chance, a significant chance, that the baby was mine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she needs help, Aaron. She needs someone to support her through this, and I can't do it. I'm probably going to jail. My family has disowned me. I've got nothing. And you think I'm going to step up and play daddy to a baby that might not even be mine? I think you're a decent guy who wouldn't abandon a pregnant woman, even if she made mistakes. I stared at Mike for a long moment, trying to process what he'd just told me. Then I started laughing. You son of a bitch. You magnificent, manipulative son of a bitch. Aaron. She's not pregnant, is she? This is just another lie, another manipulation, another attempt to make me feel guilty enough to help you out of the hole you've dug for yourselves. I swear to God she's pregnant. Then she can prove it. Medical records, tests, ultrasound photos. But we both know she can't, because she's not pregnant. She's just desperate. I stood up and looked down at Mike, who seemed to shrink into his chair. Here's what's going to happen, Mike. You're going to go back to whatever rock you've been hiding under, and you're going to stay there. You're not going to contact me again. You're not going to drive by my house. You're not going to try to involve me in your legal problems. And if I find out you've been spreading lies about me to try to save your own ass, I'm going to make your life much more difficult than it already is. Aaron, please. We're done here. I walked out of the Starbucks and drove straight to my attorney's office. Ms. Prewitt, I need to ask you something. If my wife is facing criminal fraud charges, does that affect our divorce proceedings? It can, yes. Criminal charges can impact asset division, especially if marital assets were used in the commission of crimes. Why do you ask? I told her about my conversation with Mike, including the pregnancy claim and the attempt to involve me in the fraud investigation. Mr. Kellum, you need to document everything. Every contact they make with you, every claim they make, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate you. If they're desperate enough to try these tactics, they'll probably escalate. Escalate how? Desperate people do desperate things. They might try to damage your reputation, interfere with your work, or even make false accusations against you. You need to be prepared. I left the attorney's office with a sick feeling in my stomach. I'd thought the worst was over, that Lydia and Mike would quietly disappear from my life and deal with the consequences of their actions. But apparently, they weren't going down without a fight. And if they wanted a fight, I was more than happy to give them one. The escalation Ms. Prewitt had warned me about came sooner than expected. I arrived at work Tuesday night to find my supervisor, Bill Hendricks, waiting for me with a grim expression. Aaron, we need to talk. There's been a complaint filed against you. What kind of complaint? Anonymous tip to the FAA claiming you've been falsifying maintenance records and selling aircraft parts illegally. They're sending an investigator tomorrow to review your work and interview your colleagues. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This was Mike and Lydia's revenge. If they were going down, they were going to try to take me with them. Bill, you know that's bullshit. I've never falsified a maintenance record in my life, and my parts business is completely legal and documented. I know that, Aaron. Everyone here knows that. But the FAA has to investigate every complaint, no matter how ridiculous it seems. You're suspended with pay pending the outcome of their review. I drove home in a rage that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. They'd attacked my marriage, my finances, and now my career. They were trying to destroy everything I'd built because they couldn't accept responsibility for their own choices. But they'd made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I spent the next 3 days preparing for the FAA investigation like I was planning a military campaign. I gathered every maintenance record I'd ever signed, every receipt from my parts business, every piece of documentation that proved my innocence. I contacted colleagues who could vouch for my work ethic and integrity. I even hired a lawyer who specialized in FAA matters to represent me during the investigation. But more importantly, I started digging into Mike and Lydia's backgrounds with the same systematic thoroughness I brought to aircraft maintenance. What I found was fascinating. Mike's employment history showed a pattern of workplace relationships that had ended badly. 3 previous jobs, 3 relationships with supervisors or colleagues, 3 resignations, in lieu of termination. He was a serial workplace predator who targeted women in positions of authority, used them for career advancement and financial support, then moved on when the relationships became inconvenient. Lydia's financial records, which I still had access to through our joint accounts, showed a pattern of increasingly desperate spending in the months before our separation. Credit card debt, personal loans, cash advances. She'd been living beyond her means for months, probably trying to keep up with Mike's expensive tastes. But the most interesting discovery came from social media. Mike's ex-girlfriend from his previous job had posted a series of Instagram stories about narcissistic workplace predators that described his behavior in detail. She'd been a marketing manager who'd lost her job after their relationship was discovered. Sound familiar? I screenshot everything and sent it to Janet in HR, along with a note suggesting they might want to share this information with law enforcement. If Mike had a pattern of targeting female supervisors for financial gain, that could elevate the charges from simple fraud to something much more serious. The FAA investigation concluded on Friday with a complete vindication of my work and business practices. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah Chen, actually complimented me on the thoroughness of my documentation. Mr. Kellum, in 20 years of investigating maintenance fraud, I've never seen records this detailed and organized. Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't understand aircraft maintenance or was deliberately trying to waste our time. Probably the latter, I said. Well, whoever it was should know that filing false reports with federal agencies is a felony. We'll be referring this matter to the FBI for investigation. Perfect. Mike and Lydia's attempt to destroy my career had just earned them a federal investigation for filing false reports. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I drove to the Meridian Tower downtown, the expensive condo building where Lydia and Mike had conducted their affair. I'd done some research on the building's management company and discovered something interesting. They had a strict policy against subletting or unauthorized guests staying for extended periods. According to the building's security logs, which were surprisingly easy to access through a friend who worked for the security company, Lydia had been staying in Mike's apartment for the past 2 weeks, despite not being on the lease. I called the building management and filed a complaint about unauthorized occupancy, providing documentation of Lydia's presence and suggesting they might want to review their tenant's compliance with lease terms. 24 hours later, Mike was served with an eviction notice for lease violations. The next phase of my plan required some help. I contacted Mike's ex-girlfriend from his previous job, the marketing manager who'd lost her career because of him. Her name was Jessica, and she was very interested in talking to someone who understood what she'd been through. He's a predator, she told me over coffee. He targets successful women, makes them feel special and understood, then uses them for money and career advancement. When the relationship falls apart, he moves on, and the woman is left to deal with the consequences alone. How many women has he done this to? That I know of? At least 4, including your wife. Probably more. Would you be willing to talk to the police about his pattern of behavior? Absolutely. I've been waiting for someone to take him seriously. I put Jessica in touch with the detective handling Mike and Lydia's fraud case. Her testimony about Mike's pattern of predatory behavior helped the prosecutor understand that this wasn't just a simple workplace affair gone wrong. It was a calculated scheme to defraud the company. The final piece of my plan came together when Lydia made one last desperate attempt to contact me. She showed up at my house on a rainy Thursday night, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her usual polished appearance had been replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of someone who'd lost everything. Aaron, please. I know you hate me, but I need help. Mike's disappeared. The police want to arrest me. I have nowhere to go. Where's your friend Shelby? Where are all those people who thought I was being too harsh? They won't return my calls. Everyone's turned against me. Imagine that. Aaron, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm begging you, please don't let them destroy me completely. I'll do anything. I'll sign any divorce papers you want. I'll give up any claim to anything. Just please, help me. I looked at her standing on my doorstep in the rain, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Lydia, do you remember what you said to me the morning I confronted you about the affair? You said I was just a glorified mechanic who never had the balls to take any real risks in life. Aaron, I was angry. I didn't mean... But you were right. I am just a glorified mechanic. I fix things that are broken. But here's what you never understood. Some things are too damaged to repair. Some things are so fundamentally compromised that the only safe option is to scrap them completely and start over. What are you saying? I'm saying you made your choice, Lydia. You chose Mike over me. You chose lies over truth. You chose short-term gratification over long-term stability. And now, you get to live with the consequences of those choices. But Aaron, the answer is no. I won't help you. I won't save you. I won't enable you to avoid responsibility for what you've done. You're an adult who made adult decisions. Now you get to face adult consequences. I started to close the door, but she grabbed the frame. You're destroying me. No, Lydia, I'm just refusing to help you rebuild what you destroyed yourself. I closed the door and watched through the peephole as she stood there for several minutes, crying in the rain. Finally, she walked away. 3 weeks later, Mike was arrested on federal fraud charges and extradited to face similar charges in 2 other states where he'd run the same scheme. Lydia pled guilty to fraud and received 2 years probation and a hefty fine that would keep her in debt for the next decade. The divorce was finalized on a sunny Tuesday morning in October. I kept the house, the truck, my retirement accounts, and my dignity. Lydia got her freedom and a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. As I walked out of the courthouse, Ms. Prewitt shook my hand and smiled. Mr. Kellum, I have to say, this has been the most satisfying case I've handled in years. Your ex-wife and her boyfriend thought they were smarter than everyone else, but they never counted on facing someone who was actually smarter than they were. I'm not smarter, I said. I just think before I act. Same thing, in my experience. I drove home through the Houston traffic, past the strip malls and apartment complexes that made up our corner of suburban paradise. The house looked exactly the same as always: brick facade, manicured lawn, white picket fence that no longer seemed quite so important. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched planes take off from the airport in the distance. Each one followed a precise flight plan, with backup systems and emergency protocols designed to handle any crisis that might arise. Marriage, I'd learned, should work the same way. But some people never bother to read the manual. My phone buzzed with a text from Jace. Heard the good news about the divorce being final. Want to grab dinner and celebrate? I typed back, absolutely, but no sushi places downtown. I hear they're overpriced. He responded with 3 laughing emojis and an address for a barbecue joint near the airport. I finished my beer and went inside to change clothes. Tomorrow I'd go back to work, back to the routine of maintaining aircraft and ensuring passenger safety. It was good, honest work that made sense, unlike marriage, apparently. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The stress fractures in my life had been identified and repaired. The faulty components had been replaced. The system was running smoothly again. Time to get back in the air.